Hey, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
He's muted.
Hey,
Can you hear us okay?
hey, Will, how are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
I'm all right. Just trying
Good.
to get connected here. You're catching me between some other meetings, so I'm not in my normal office.
Ah. Where are you?
I'm at a hotel
Ah.
in their kind of dining area. So you have to, this is the really exciting life of an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, welcome and thanks for taking the time to meet with us.
Yes.
This is my advisory. So I've got a group of
Okay.
students from all grade ranges that have an interest in business and technology.
Okay.
And we meet together a few times a week and do various activities, especially related to skill building. And
Okay.
so we're excited to meet with you. I wasn't going to tell them that you were my brother-in-law, and then I accidentally mentioned it, and then somebody else mentioned it. So they do know that. At first, they were like, "How'd you get the CEO of BRCK to speak with us?"
Well, I'm glad I can help out.
Yeah.
So yeah, how would you like me to do this? Or what would be the most useful?
If you could share for a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes about kind of how the path to what you're doing and some of the challenges and of being an entrepreneur and the work that you're doing. And then they've prepared some questions, and as you're talking, they might write down some other questions to ask, and we can do a little Q&A.
Okay.
We've got about 30 minutes if you have that much time.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Sure. So, how far back you want me to go in the history of like how to get here and everything?
Well, maybe how you got interested in business and
okay,
what to really develop a successful business.
All right. Well, so it's been a journey, and let me just start with that. I grew up out here in Kenya, in Sudan, and then went to university in the U.S. I started off doing African studies. So I wasn't even in business school, and then I decided to go into business later. But I part of the reason why is you can choose to go down different routes in life, and and one route isn't right all the time. So I think that sometimes it's okay to be employed, and sometimes it's good to be an employer. I think entrepreneurship, or being a business builder, is a lot of hard work, and people have to be ready for that. You're going to work harder than any of your friends to go to work for somebody else. Okay. But what happens too is that you have freedom and you have autonomy to do things. You are in charge of kind of your own destiny with this. And so if you like that kind of control and ability to build what you want to build, then it can be a really good thing for you. What happened for me is I was in school, and I was like going into business school. I actually started running a little business on my own at the time. And I don't know, Will, if you remember, I had that t-shirt operation. I'd run out of the house, and I would go down, business to business around the small town we lived in, and sell to the universities, and basically do t-shirt orders, custom t-shirt orders. And that really taught me a lot about how to build a business, and how one of the main things, whether you like it or not, as the founder, is you always have to be selling. Sometimes that selling is to your own people internally, and sometimes it's to outside investors, and sometimes it's to your own customers, but you're in charge of the money. So that was a t-shirt business. It kind of helped me pay for school and get through school. And then I went on to my first business, which was actually a furniture company. So I was sourcing high-end furniture out of East Africa and selling into the wholesale furniture markets in North Carolina. There's a lot of things to learn about business in school that practically speaking, you won't understand how to deal with it. So one of mine was cash flow. What does it mean to have a certain amount of cash in your bank? And if you're buying inventory like I was and filling containers, what happens when you're, you can't pre-sell enough? Well, you run out of money and then you can't actually do this thing anymore. So that went for about 2 years until I finally shut it down. And then I got into the tech side of things and started working for other people for a little while to learn more of the ropes. And then started building platforms with other people. And, before you know it, I started building some interesting things, one of which ended up being a nonprofit that grew pretty big, which is called Ushahidi. It's still out there, still widely used. I then also built this big tech space in Nairobi called the Innovation Hub. So 17,000 members, a pretty big area, but pretty big building. And it put me in touch with a lot of people that were in this tech space so it built my network, right? And I was able to have conversations with people I wouldn't normally have. So for instance, like if you were Erik Schmidt of Google and you were coming to Nairobi, where would you go? You'd go see the president, and then you'd come see the iHub. So I would be hanging out with the, CEOs of Google and Facebook. So Mark Zuckerberg's been to our office. The president of CEO of Microsoft, the top investors in the world to come through here. And so I was able to meet with a lot of those guys and build that network out even further than it was before. Then about 2011 or 12, started building this idea for the BRCK company, which I run today, which was, how do we connect ourselves better in Africa, and really understanding that there was a problem here and trying to understand if there was a market for a solution. And I think that's one of the areas as a young entrepreneur you have to really pay attention to. There's things that are needed out there, and there's things that you can build a solution for a problem that nobody has. And so you have to be really careful that you're not doing that. You have to have something that people want to pay for. So started building this idea of the BRCK, prototyped it out, realized that there is enough people that want to do this, and formed the company, started building the product and shipping the product, realized that the product we were shipping was a good product, but that it didn't have a big enough growth trajectory as a business. So we pivoted away from just being a product company into saying, okay, we have this BRCK device, we can put it into public spaces and then provide a Wi-Fi service to the people around it, and building up a whole new business model for connectivity. And that's what we do today. So that's that whole time from 2013 to 2019 now, 6 years, has been the lifetime of the BRCK company. And it's been about us kind of figuring out what that path looks like to be kind of where we are today. We have major partnerships with Facebook and Google and the rest. We're in Kenya and Rwanda, and we just announced being in South Africa a couple weeks ago. And so it's been a journey, but we're getting there. So anyway, that's been that's a very truncated story for what my last, 10, 15 years have been, but I don't know. Is that helpful so far? Should I go deeper into any of that?
That's definitely helpful. Yeah. So I don't know if there are questions that triggers for you all in terms of what you're thinking about doing. We've got 4 seniors in here, a couple of them that are interested in, they're all interested in things related to, 3 of them particularly in computer science, and so
okay.
There's definitely some interest. But if you guys have some questions that you want to hear more about, yeah.
Well, it's very nice to speak with you, sir. Whenever you were developing this product that you made, how sure were you that you had a definite market for the product whenever it came out?
Yeah, so when we did a, you guys are familiar with Kickstarter, right? So we did a Kickstarter campaign to kind of gauge that interest in the product. We weren't sure either what it would look like. So we did that. We got a couple, I think we were about 1,200, 1,500 people who pre-ordered it. And that meant, okay, there's enough confidence now that there's something here that we formed the company. So we didn't form the company until we had gotten that far. Of course, we had put a lot of money into prototyping and getting things together by then. But that was because we're in hardware. Hardware is more expensive, and I would not suggest that you need to do hardware most of the time. If you're in software or in some other business, you can bootstrap yourself, your own kind of nights and weekends, putting your own time in, as well as a small amount of your own money, and you can actually get to understanding if there's a buyer for your product, if there's a revenue stream for it.
Somebody else? Troy?
So, well, thanks for, I guess, talking to us. What kind of education does it take to get into the technology field?
What type of what does it take?
What type of education?
Yeah, how much?
I mean, so I don't think you need. So I think the reason we get university degrees is primarily to show people that we can stick with something for 4 years on our own as adults. You know, like business school, especially your kind of MBA programs, it's not there for entrepreneurship. It's primarily there for polishing you up to work for large corporate organizations. So if you want to go work for a big company, I think MBA programs are great. If you want to be an entrepreneur, finish high school, start building stuff, try and pay your way through school or whatever with like things that you build and do. And, you know, and like my business partner never finished university. He started building his first business and ended up selling it to another tech company, and, you know, then got into real estate and then got back into tech, you know, so like he never did finish university. So what kind of education do you need? Well, you need to be able to be smart enough to read a lot on your own, and you need to be, I think you want to definitely finish your high school years. And then if there's certain areas that you think you can get better training in from a university, you can just go spot take those classes too. You don't have to go to the whole degree program. So anyway, I hope to answer your question. I do not think university education is a must to be an entrepreneur.
What about when you're looking for employees? What are the things you're looking for?
So I come with smart and gets things done. I want people who are who can show a track record of getting things done, doing stuff, and then also that means a portfolio of work. Like, show me what you've done. If if you're a software engineer, okay, great. Show me some code stuff that you've written. Show me some projects you've worked on. If you're a sales guy, all right, show me, kind of what you've sold before and how you did it. If there's a portfolio of work that each of us has built up over time, show it to me. That means that you can get things done. Smart means, I want to know that you're smart enough that you can figure things out. Do I need to see your resume to understand either of these things? It could be a little bit helpful, but I really think resumes are just like, basically, I don't know. I don't really trust them. I don't really believe them. So they're of some value, but not much. I'd rather talk to you, understand your kind of intellectual level, and then make sure that you have a history of getting stuff done. So I don't care about resumes.
Who else has a question? Austin?
I was a little curious about prototype bricks. I was wondering what your thought process was on coming up with a prototype for this piece of technology.
Yeah. So if you go back into the archives history of on the brick blog, you'll see some of the stuff I've written about that. I mean, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was in software. I'd never done hardware before. Thank goodness 2 guys came along who did understand that side of the business, and they joined me as volunteers, and then they eventually became my co-founders in the company. So Philip and Reg. I think a lot of things that you do in building businesses, you're going into it kind of like try and be eyes wide open, but understand that there's just a lot you don't know. So with prototyping a brick, the first devices look like IEDs, right? They should never have been allowed on an airplane. And the fact that they did gives me even less confidence in the U.S. Security at airports. But it also things don't have to be pretty in order for you to progress them, right? Like do something, get traction with something, build something, and then learn from that and iterate and build and iterate and build. What people don't know is that that prototyping phase of BRCK before we became, even before we did the Kickstarter, was 18 months. And then it was another 12 months before we shipped our first product. So there's a long time, and you know, so that's in hardware. Other things won't take as long, but your prototyping phase and you're just doing stuff, even when you don't know what you're doing, is super valuable. And just get down and do it. Don't let like having the perfect be the enemy of the good. Which is like, don't wait for the perfect time, the perfect solution, the perfect thing. Just do something, and then iterate off that. Do the next thing, and then learn off that, and evolve, and then do the next thing, and then evolve. That's the only way in my world that I've ever seen it work, unless you're super wealthy.
That would be
So
Then why are you building it anyway?
That's right.
for like your average day, what does that look like for you planning wise, or like your week, I guess?
It differs on kind of what level of the business you're in. When you're first starting, you know, you kind of, there's no time that you work and time you don't work. It's just, you know, that's, you work when you need to, you do phone calls when you need to. It's like, and still today that's true for me, but now I'm not as practically useful inside the company. Like we're 100 people now, so it's a lot more people. I'm doing emails, I'm doing phone calls, I'm doing meetings, I'm talking a lot, and coordinating people and making sure that the mission and vision of the organization stays sound, that people are able to get their work done. But I don't actually get to do any real meaningful work anymore on product. But in the early days, for the first couple of years, that's all you do. You're deep into every detail, every decision, what feature is going to be built, why it's going to be built, what market you're going after, who you're talking to for investors or sales and whatever. Like you're doing everything, and then it changes over time as you grow the organization.
What was
So actually, real quick, what does my day look like? I'm usually up by 6:30 or so, go run, and then come back. Then try and get all my emails answered. Try and get inbox 0 before I go to work. So that way I'm not thinking about everybody who's lacking my communication. Deal with whatever meetings I have throughout the day. Make sure to always try and grab lunch with my leadership team every day, so it kind of keeps us in touch with each other. And then in the evening, I try and cut out in the evening around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock to be able to be back home with the family. And then, you know, sometimes I'm back on the computer after 8 p.m. Sometimes not, depending on the day. A lot of times I have to deal with U.S. investors on the West Coast. And that means that I'm doing calls, you know, from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. But it depends on the day of the week too.
So what was your largest concern when you started your company?
Largest concern. So yeah, the largest concern when you start, my largest concern when I started was, can we find an investor who's willing to invest in us, because hardware is expensive to build, and nobody wants to invest in Africa, nor do they want to invest in hardware. So you've got two things going against you. So that was one of my larger concerns. The other concern is, can we build a product that works? You know, the prototype, when you go from prototype to, you know, to shipping real product, there's, especially hardware, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and there's a lot of things that did. We had our fair share of issues. You know, we successfully overcame both of those concerns. But like for investors, I probably talked to 50 investors before I got, you know, 3 that would invest. Right? It just takes a lot of time. Same with shipping product. You know, we shipped our first couple hundred devices and found major issues and had to recall those and then ship out another version. You know, those concerns are there for a reason, and they're sometimes hard to fulfill on. And being an entrepreneur is finding creative ways to solve problems, even when it doesn't look like there's a way forward. And it's not often when people believe that you can do it. And let me say, there is two different types of entrepreneurs. There's entrepreneurs who are trying to build scale businesses like myself that will have exponential growth potential. And then there's other entrepreneurs who are building a small business. So if you're building a business that does lawns, or you're doing a business that, is a local store in the town, very different type of business than what I do. Still, it takes a lot of, the same kind of grit and determination, but it does require a different approach to everything from investors to product. And so that, of course, adjusts what the company is. So let me ask you guys a question. Is anybody in there running your own business yet? Any type? Are you selling anything to anybody? You could be mowing lawns. You could be, you could be doing web services for people, building websites. Is anybody doing anything?
Thank you.
Are you?
Yeah.
So tell them, Macy. Tell them about you.
So I'm just like.
Yeah. What do you do?
So like, I just help my neighborhoods and do like yard works. That's like part of my service.
Yeah. So they pay you for coming in and cleaning or trimming or whatever it is, or mowing, that kind of stuff?
It depends on what they gave to me, so I just receive it.
Okay, good. And that's what it takes. I mean, like, you can't have like too much of an ego as an entrepreneur. You just got to go out there and build stuff and do stuff. Like, my first thing I said was a t-shirt company. I was going from the local bar to the local furniture shop to the local, donut shop or whoever, and just trying to sell them t-shirts. So got to start somewhere.
Works. Yeah. Who else has a question?
What? So whenever you were my mother and my father, they're both local entrepreneurs. My mother specifically runs a marketing company locally. Has the potential of expanding, but she never has. She's, I suppose, still wants that control. So what was expanding like for you?
So expanding, like in that type of business versus my type is different. Like, we expanded into Rwanda first. So it was finding a local partner that we could work with, and then building up the capacity internally to do kind of remotely what we do in Kenya in another country. I've also expanded another company. So Ushahidi, which is that nonprofit company, it's used in like over 200 countries now around the world, like 150,000 deployments of the software. It's gotten pretty big. That one, the expansion was in how do we build our team, and then how do we help people deploy our software in these different countries around the world. And so that was a different type of expansion. And it required more in the way of human resources and making sure that we had the right processes to work with other organizations and things like that. I think in the case of what you said your mom, right, is doing, is that's the case of like you finding the right real estate or finding the right she's obviously dealing with the supply chain, making sure she can get that in there in the right price, and then also make sure there's enough buyers in the local area of the products and services, right? So it's a little bit different than this, but it comes from the same source, right? There's a lot of things about business that people overcomplicate, and it's like, provide a service that you add value to and that costs you less than you're selling it for. That's it, all right? That's the whole thing. There's nothing else. And if, as an entrepreneur, if you can do that in any business, then you make money. So in my world, I have to do it by finding partners and deploying our public Wi-Fi into buses and to public spaces and all this other stuff. In her world, it means she has to open another location, possibly do some marketing locally, things like that help her to expand.
Who else?
Wow.
Yes.
What does your competition look like in Kenya and around your areas that you're in?
So competition, you can think about it in two ways. There's direct competition and indirect competition. So in the direct competition space, I mean, we're the always try and be the A player, right? In the way you execute everything, always be the varsity team to everybody's JV. Okay, and so that's what we are. Like we're miles ahead of our direct competition. We don't even think about them. The indirect competition is much more complicated. Think about, in our world, the indirect competition is the mobile operator, the mobile company, or it's, any other way you'll get internet. And so we have to think about that and what they're doing in the same general space as us, and if it's competitive enough, and how, if they're the 900-pound gorillas, we're the little guys, right? So how do we position ourselves to actually be competitive but look non-competitive, so that they don't use outside market forces like legal and regulatory frameworks to inhibit our growth. So you have to think about things differently when it comes to those big boys on a country scale. I would say this about competition is always pay attention, like read. Because even the guys that we don't care about that are behind us, we still read about them and keep track of where they are. We hear about what they're doing in the market. We keep track of things, but we also just have faith in our business model and in growing our thing, and we don't get distracted by them.
Both like Google and Facebook have been working on solutions for internet access in rural areas and things. And how have you managed to do something that's better than what they're trying to do, especially with, the scope of their work?
Yeah, so, like I said, one of our biggest partners is Facebook. They pay us a lot of money. And the reason they do is because, as a large global company, they can't really have a ground game. It's impossible for them to be in 200 countries around the world and do what we do, right? So they need to partner with people like us. And so we're friendly with them, and when the opportunity arose, we were able to do some commercial deals with them that allowed us to expand. Like, so for instance, my expansion to South Africa is fully paid for by Facebook. I didn't take any investor money for that. That's a couple $1 million. And that didn't dilute my company at all. Got me got me even tighter with Facebook. They're invested in our success. And so the other thing you think about, so like, who is dealing with internet around the world? There's the satellite companies, there's the large internet service providers, like the guys who do undersea cables, and then there's the guys who care about the internet penetration, which is Google and Facebook, because they make their money off of how many people are online. So if I look across that world, I see, like, I was just in London on Friday having a meeting with one of the largest satellite companies in the world, and they cannot figure out how to do consumer-facing Wi-Fi. They just do not have the model for it. And so what we do is we say, well, listen, you're the air game. It's like think about a World War II or something, right? You can have all the air power in the world, but if you don't have a ground game, you'll lose the war, right? This is what happened to Germany. You can come in, and if you can't carpet bomb an area, but if you don't have a ground game to hold that space, then you lose. Same thing in the internet realm. You can come in with your satellites and drones and balloons and whatever else you have, and but if you don't have a way to distribute that on the ground to ordinary people, there's nothing there. And so that's how we think about it, and that's how we do deals with these companies.
So does that come out of your background as a Marine? The ground game?
My a lot of, my analogies, my metaphors, yeah, they sometimes do.
What about your relationship with investors? Like, how does that work? What's the ownership of your company, and how do you manage that relationship, and in terms of raising funds and then that whole side of it?
I mean, it's not super complex. Like, you're getting to people who say, I'm going to build this, and I expect this amount of growth and returns on this building. I need X amount of money to do so, right? And then you both agree on what you think the value of the company is, and they give you that X amount of money for it. So in the beginning, we raised $1.4 million in our seed round. And that was really to get us through the kind of first 12 to 18 months of the business to ship our first product. And then most of the time when investors are investing in that very early stage, they know that you're not going to have figured everything out. You're going to have to pivot your business a little bit. And we did. And we had to, right? And our investors knew that. And they're like, okay, great. All right. Well, what makes sense to do next? And then they give us their input on it as well. And then we shift and we run against that. You know, I report back into the board. I'm on the board. I'm the chairman of the board too. And so, you know, we have our board meetings. I report to the rest of the board on things as the CEO of the company too, about where we are in the last quarter and where we're doing the next quarter. And then we move on. I mean, it's the investors can be hugely valuable in their network and connecting you to other people with money, or so oftentimes what I look for is investors that also have a background in the same space so they can give us some insight and thinking about stuff that we don't normally, we might not have yet. Yeah.
Bowie?
I have a question about, I guess, advice to someone that's not necessarily starting a business distributing a product, but distributing their services. Like, how do you get yourself out there to start off?
I didn't quite catch that well.
Okay, so about if you're not necessarily distributing a product, but a service, so as a service entrepreneur, how do you go about that process?
It kind of depends on the service, right? In our case, our service is something that you can connect to, right? So people will see it on their phone. They'll see this Wi-Fi service pop up. It depends if your service is like, God, there's so many different types of service. Like you could be a shrink, right? And do psychological evaluations, or you could do web design services, right? There's different services. Some of it's about marketing. There's a great quote that I love, which is, marketing is a tax on a bad product. And I think most of your marketing should come from the value of the product you have and the customers you get that want to talk about it to others. So word of mouth is the best marketing. There's a point that you will do some type of spend on marketing, but you need to make sure that the service is of the right quality to be of value to that market first. Gosh, and that's a big bucket question. So that was a kind of a big bucket answer too. But yeah, there's some marketing that needs to be done. But first of all, make a product that people want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, our time's up, and I gotta send these folks on. But
Okay.
Really appreciate you taking the time, and it's great to see you and hear more about what you're doing and how things are going. So
yeah. Well, good to see you guys. Hopefully, as you guys get things together for your own businesses, I'd like to hear about it.